EarthBound. This classic RPG is known for, well, Ness in Super Smash Bros., but besides that, it's authentic weirdness. Typically, adventures through castles with swords and wizards are what comes to mind when one thinks of an old RPG. But EarthBound truly stands out for its uniquely modern themes and unconventional mechanics. Although this is one of the oldest titles I've covered in the Best and Worst series, it's absolutely worth experiencing today, though be aware that some outdated qualities will take getting used to. In this video, I'm going to lay out what I found to be the best and the worst aspects of this game. Be warned that full spoilers for EarthBound are on the table. The best. Number 1, weirdness. EarthBound's most well-known quality is also its best quality. I haven't played many RPGs that go for this kind of tone and wackiness, but my god does EarthBound make it work. It's immediately apparent when walking around the very first areas. A lot of places seem conventional, but bizarre enemies inhabit every corner of this world. In how many games can you fight a floating abstract piece of art? Or a living pile of barf? Kiss of Death, French Kiss of Death, Scalding Coffee Cup, Kraken drawn by a child? Mad Duck is beast. Look at this goo man. Look at him. This is all remarkably charming, but the NPC interactions and story sequences enhance it all even further. Giant iron pencil blocking your path? Use a pencil eraser to get rid of it. Giant iron eraser blocking your path? Use the eraser. Isn't that obvious? This man loves dungeons so much, he wants to be one himself one day, and wouldn't you know it, he accomplishes just that. Talk about living up to your dreams, and he even placed signs around explaining his design choices and player psychology. Cultists literally painting the world blue to bring happiness. A famous singer who autographs your banana peel. A town overrun with zombies who get defeated by the zombie equivalent of flypaper. Absolute genius. Did I mention the kid working on an invention to turn boiled eggs into raw eggs? Or the mayor's assistant who needs trout-flavored yogurt exactly when your inventor friend finishes a machine that can make yogurt of any flavor. Except it's not working properly and can only make one kind, which happens to be trout-flavored. Pure, distilled gobbledygook. These are also some of the most entertaining NPCs I've dealt with in a long time. You can buy everything but love, friendship, and experience points. 10 out of 10 dialogue. They're not afraid to break the fourth wall either, but like everything else, it fits the tone. Strangeness superbly executed, and I love it. Number 2, creativity abounds. EarthBound always keeps you guessing. Progression's unpredictable, and because of that, very engaging, with all sorts of events keeping you on your toes. Enemies are similar, capable of all kinds of attacks and behaviors. Some of them even walk around towns. How often does that happen? Considering its narrative eccentricities, EarthBound's an absolute trailblazer in creativity, and isn't afraid to rethink basic RPG conventions. The most notable choice being the rolling HP meter. Basically, if a character takes lethal damage, you can prevent them from dying if you heal them before it rolls to 0. Later in the game, when your party has high HP, this creates an interesting combination of turn-based decision-making while executing things as quickly as possible. It's a very novel system that adds a lot of identity to the combat, and EarthBound doesn't end there with stimulating concepts. When well leveled, weak enemies are defeated in an instant, without even having to enter battle, and it still gives you experience points and item drops. That's nuts, and a major quality of life inclusion most current-day RPGs don't have. Teleporting's another inspired idea. Unlike many games, it isn't as simple as selecting a location on a menu. The surrounding space actually matters when you use it, requiring you to build up enough momentum without hitting anything around you. Instantly slaying enemies is convenient, while teleporting only when you have the space is inconvenient. But both of these things are incredibly effective at absorbing you more effortlessly into the world. And because of that, I love this way of teleporting. Items are another great example of thinking outside the box, and tons of them have unique effects and applications. You can use condiments to increase or decrease the effectiveness of food. There's a sale sign you can attract customers with to sell items out in the wild. And you can even get a fresh egg, a healing item that if held for too long hatches into a chick, eventually becoming a fully grown chicken. These ideas may seem unconventional for the sake of it, but the developers clearly focused on crafting things this way to help the world feel more like a real place. These choices add character and depth to the game, and absolutely paid off. Number 3, Pokey Minch. The relentless creativity continues with Ness's antagonistic neighbor, Pokey, a bratty kid craving power and willing to join absolutely anything to get it. He's your typical cowardly villain who only looks out for himself, but plays nice when it suits him. The absurdity of his role throughout the game is unexpected but so appropriate. Like Ness, Pokey is just a kid from a small town who grows and attains power, but he does it through totally opposite means to Ness, teaming up with cultists and corrupt officials. Pokey symbolizes greed, ignorance, and reckless confidence, which a lot of these evil entities represent, and because of that, he's captivating to watch. His abusive, materialistic parents make a strong case for why he is this way, lacking warmth in his upbringing. When writing a character, the best thing they can be is interesting, and Pokey nails that. You don't know what he's capable of or what he'll do next, so he comes off as dangerous despite showing poor judgment and cowardice. By the end of the game, he's working directly with Gigas, the primary antagonist, suited up in a gnarly spider mech and talking more trash than ever. He's mad with power by this point, and doesn't even get his comeuppance once it's over. He even sends you a taunting letter at the end. Pokey leaves a very strong impression. His pig-like appearance is iconic at this point, and his overall presence is a standout in a game already packed with highlights. This fascinating character is a breath of fresh air for video game narratives, and suits EarthBound perfectly. Number 4, presentation. EarthBound looks incredible, opting for clean, simple sprite work that's surprisingly effective at drawing you into the world. Everything's colorful, identifiable, and bursting with style. Style describes a lot in this game. Using various colors and effects, there's an enormous variety of locations and moods, with a clear priority to craft unique settings that make an impression. Moonside's dark, neon aesthetic is a fantastic example. Magicant's another one, with its bizarre and dreamy themes. Even the Lost Underworld's distinct perspective adds so much character. The more modern, pedestrian locations are great to explore. Roaming through restaurants, department stores, and museums is a stark contrast to the more wacky environments, creating the specific style EarthBound excels at. I already gushed on how charming enemy design is, but their sprite work deserves a lot of praise too. Plague Rat of Doom has to be mentioned. And of course, Gigas himself. My god at these visuals. Battles often have sick backgrounds, and are another crucial part of EarthBound's robust style. The most important thing I've yet to mention is the music. This game is filled with great tracks, perfectly setting the atmosphere of every scene. Town themes are uplifting and catchy. Strange places are accompanied by artistic, thought-provoking tunes, and heartfelt moments are gushing with emotion from such beautiful melodies. The sanctuary spots hitting me every single time. It's not always in your face either. The music knows when to quiet down and let atmosphere build, like the initial jaunt to the meteorite, or even when just wandering around caves. And I'm definitely giving credit to multiple random battle tracks. I can't tell you how many RPGs have driven me crazy by the end because they only have one song for random encounters. EarthBound's selection is varied, and because of that, none of them get old. The final thing I want to acknowledge is how succinct and streamlined dialogue and storytelling is. A lot of RPGs are poorly written, lacking focus with too much unnecessary dialogue that leads to an unengaging narrative. There's little consistency consideration in being concise, and while stories are a big part of the genre, often they could be a lot tighter and more conscious of interactivity and pacing. In the case of EarthBound, keeping the player engaged is always prioritized. Story and dialogue is straightforward and brief, and gameplay's rarely taken away from the player for long. You don't need to write a lot for the player to care, since even with this direct presentation, I was endeared to the main party despite how little they spoke and reacted to events, and found the ending scenes touching, chosen when stories are often too cliche to be interesting. But it's not very focused on in EarthBound, foregoing unnecessary fanfare so the story feels grounded and approachable. Number 5, memorable, awesome sequences. I've touched upon this aspect a few times already, but it deserves its own highlight. When thinking back on a game, certain parts will stand out. This combination of creativity and atmosphere ensures nearly every part of the game will linger in memory. These set pieces are masterfully conceived, with one captivating scenario after another. I already mentioned the nighttime trip to see the meteorite and learn of Ness's destiny, but this introduction is a wonderful example of the strong feelings this game evokes. The visually enchanting moments are some of the more obvious examples, but even the smaller ones stand out. There's so much worth mentioning. Saturn Valley and its adorably naive residents who are taken to work in a factory run by a pile of barf. The sudden transition to Pooh's homeland of Dalam as he gets ready to join the crew. The department store blackout where Paul is kidnapped. The touching moment where luminous stones express Ness's inner thoughts to the group. And especially the aforementioned Threed zombie infestation, where after Ness and Paula are captured by a gang of zombies, the story moves over to Jeff, who has to work through his own situation to rescue them. Look at Tenda Village. These little creatures are so shy they can't bring themselves to talk to you. You end up getting them a book called Overcoming Shyness to get them to open up. Freaking adorable. The moments of growth stand out a lot too. After overcoming an area leading to one of Ness's sanctuaries, the enemies will all desperately avoid you. An awesome little detail that helps you feel empowered, especially with how brutal a lot of these places are. Ness's self-realization in Magicant, conquering his inner evil, is another well-done power moment. He gets a huge boost to his stats here. You really feel getting stronger. And we have to mention Gigas. The very first thing you see after starting EarthBound is the terrifying future you have to prevent, accompanied with chilling audio. By the end, turning into robots and warping to the past for the final confrontation is impactful. It's an eerie setting, and the biological, horrendous form of Gigas pays off. Finishing the fight by praying and glimpsing families special to the main characters may be a bit cheesy, but I'm a sucker for this kind of thing when done well, and seeing Gigas become more unstable in response is satisfying. Topping off the whole adventure is something I've never seen in a game before: my name appearing in the credits as the player. What a delightful capstone to a loving, sincere experience. Man, I really praised this one. It's not undeserved though. EarthBound's best qualities are really something, but we all know what comes next, and every masterpiece is not without its weaknesses. The worst. Number 1, clunky interfaces. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this game's really inconvenient when it comes to item management and menus. I say that since it's a fairly common problem with older RPGs, and while it could certainly be worse here, it does take getting used to. To start, item space is very limited, especially if it's your first time playing, as you'll constantly find yourself over-encumbered with items. To make things worse, key items and equipment all use the same basic item storage. With so many things to carry, you'll almost definitely have to burn through helpful items when you don't want to. Even the map takes up space. There is a storage system, so you don't have to throw everything away, but it's kind of unintuitive to use. You have to make a phone call and wait for a delivery man to show up, and even then he can only do 3 items at a time. And don't get me wrong, I adore how unique this system is. It's a charming way of doing this, and unmistakably EarthBound. EarthBound. But for something that's supposed to be helpful, ideally it would be more convenient. The biggest worry for a new player is storing something they might end up needing later on, and having to go out of their way to get it back. With how unexpected EarthBound can be, it's pretty much impossible to know if something's worth keeping on hand. Moving items between party members is also clunky and time-consuming, and there's no easy way to tell if equipment will benefit someone unless you manually move it around and check one at a time. Buying equipment at a shop does show if something will improve stats, but doesn't show what the actual increase is, so you won't know how much of a boost it is until you buy it. Likewise, when buying regular items, you won't know what something does until you have it, and it'd be nice if they had basic descriptions, or at least a way to ask. These aren't major issues or anything, but decidedly dated. Number 2, late game attrition. EarthBound doesn't pull its punches. Early on, areas will be tough to get through with Ness alone, and it's not until you get the full party that things get a lot more manageable. Not long after that though, because you have such a capable party, dungeon and enemy design shifts in a way I'm not really a fan of. It starts in the pyramid. In this dungeon, enemies are a lot more abundant and difficult to avoid. From here on out, areas are far more cramped, while enemies get faster, and most of the late game locations feel like battles of attrition because of this. Since fights can use up so many resources, more unavoidable ones increases the challenge, but naturally, it gets more draining as the game goes on. The last third of EarthBound is mostly dungeon crawling, with shorter in-between sections that don't have much to explore. The pacing takes a big hit since battles become the primary thing you'll be doing, and too many of the later dungeons are drawn out because they're so densely populated with enemies. It feels like a slog at times. Enemy design itself also changes. Most of the later enemies are fast, with some really nasty attacks. Some will even throw an unavoidable party wipe at the start of battle. Shout out to the creature that can confuse your entire party. These enemies are pretty ridiculous, and turn battles into races with little variation or strategy. It's hit them with your strongest attacks immediately or get wrecked. The return trip to Onet and final chasm leading up to Gigas are loaded with enemies like this, especially Ghost of Starman. But there's one other area that outdoes all of the others. Number 3, Stonehenge Base. Probably the worst part of the game, Stonehenge Base is a maze-like dungeon filled with obnoxious enemies that goes on for way too long. It's a heck of a difficulty spike at this point. We have starmen that spam heavily damaging attacks that hit multiple party members, often one-shotting them. A creature who inflicts the status effect Diamondized, which is basically an insta-kill at no cost and hard to prevent. And the most annoying enemy in the game, the Atomic Power Robot, who can fully heal itself or its companion instantly, which it can do for free as many times as it wants. Also, killing it causes it to explode and damage your entire party, which is unavoidable. Awesome. At this point, any strategy that isn't hyper offense becomes hard to justify. That's one of the most vicious things about this place, the sheer number of fights to get through it. It's the biggest test of attrition in the game. The final fight against Starman DX is also an RNG nightmare, being able to wipe your entire party out at the very start of battle if he chooses. Cross your fingers you don't have to go through the entire dungeon again. Once you get through this place, you can get through pretty much anything in EarthBound, but man is it a drag to finish. Number 4, Talarama Monkey Caves. You gotta be kidding me with this place. This is a troll dungeon, straight up. After completing Moonside, when about to get Paula back, you're arbitrarily sent off to a cave in the desert to give a bunch of random items to monkeys and meander through tunnels that all look the same. This place is intentionally confusing, tedious, and time-consuming, adding so little to the game it could be cut out entirely. It feels included just to be weird, but plenty of things like that are in the game already, and this one doesn't offer much. It's a little too forced, and with how much menu management's involved, it's a hassle to get through. They even had the cheek to put a pencil statue all the way at the end of the maze when you've almost certainly stored the item to get rid of it with Escargot Express, since you've only used it once up until now, tons of hours ago, so you have to go all the way back out of the maze tunnels just to get the pencil eraser, only to then go all the way back in. They know what they did, and they succeeded in making a troll dungeon. Congratulations, Talarama. Number 5, a few more things. I'm just gonna list these off. Sporadically throughout the game, your dad will call you to ask if you want to take a break. This is a really uncommon thing in older video games, so I suppose it's a cute inclusion for the time, but they quickly become a nuisance and destroy the immersion of some pivotal moments. Some bosses could have used more interesting tracks instead of the standard battle theme, like Master Belch. The second trip through Dungeon Man is especially unnecessary, as is going all the way back through Winters when heading to Stonehenge Base. It's clear padding. A few spelling errors exist, so that. Some of the final sections, like Magic Hand and the trip back to Onnet, could have been more fleshed out. They're nice set pieces, with a lot of untapped potential. The last thing is the static effect after defeating Gigas. It's cool at first, but goes on for too long for how visually nauseating it can be. I had to look away after a bit. But that's it. You did really good, EarthBound. This is one of the best Super Nintendo games I've played. And no, I haven't played many, but it's safe to say this is a special game in the RPG genre. I don't normally feel sad that a game's over, but EarthBound left a surprisingly strong impression on me. In addition to the dated interface, the unforgiving difficulty in the first few hours can make this a hard game to get into. It's easy to get frustrated when you're still learning the ropes, but once you understand what to prioritize and how to move through it, EarthBound's a very rewarding experience. Anyone interested in quirky, experimental RPGs should absolutely give it a try. But truer than ever, you'll have the best time if you give yourself over to the game, take your time, and settle into the adventure. EarthBound is a pillar of innovation and creativity, and already holds a special place in my heart. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked my video, subscribe and check out my Patreon. Thanks so much to all of my patrons for your support. I'll see you next time.